The world has known countless criminals whose names faded with time, but every so often, history produces someone whose story continues to puzzle investigators, psychologists, and ordinary people decades later. Some criminals relied on force, others relied on fear. Charles Sobhraj relied on something far more dangerous: trust. He rarely appeared threatening. He did not fit the image most people associated with a violent criminal. He was polite, articulate, impeccably dressed, and remarkably calm. He could speak to strangers with the confidence of an old friend, making them feel seen, understood, and safe. To weary backpackers traveling across Asia in search of adventure during the 1970s, he often appeared to be exactly the kind of person they hoped to meet. Someone experienced, knowledgeable, and willing to help. Yet behind that carefully crafted image was a man whose name would eventually become one of the most infamous in international criminal history. His life became a story of deception, manipulation, fraud, prison escapes, and murders that crossed national borders, forcing investigators from multiple countries to work together in pursuit of a man who seemed to vanish almost as quickly as he appeared. This is the story of Charles Sobhraj, a man who fooled countless people, challenged law enforcement across continents, and left behind a legacy that still fascinates the world today. But above all else, it is a story about the devastating human cost of manipulation and the importance of remembering the victims whose lives were forever changed. Charles Sobhraj was born on April 6, 1944 in Saigon, then part of French Indochina, now known as Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. His father was an Indian businessman named Sobhraj Hachin Bayanani, while his mother, Song Thai, was Vietnamese. The marriage did not last. His father soon left the family, leaving Charles to grow up without a consistent relationship with him. His mother later married a French army officer, and the family relocated several times as military responsibilities changed. Growing up between different cultures meant Charles was exposed to Vietnamese, French, and Indian influences. While many children struggled to adapt to such constant change, Charles developed an unusual ability to observe people closely. He learned how different communities behaved, how people spoke, what they valued, and how they reacted in different situations. Those who later studied his life often pointed to this period as one in which he became exceptionally skilled at adjusting his personality depending on the people around him. Despite living in relatively stable circumstances after his mother's remarriage, Charles often appeared restless. Reports suggest he had difficulty accepting authority and rarely seemed intimidated by rules. Teachers recognized that he was intelligent, yet he often lacked interest in following expectations placed upon him. Rather than confronting people directly, he learned something that would define much of his later life: how to persuade rather than threat. As a teenager in France, he became involved in minor criminal activity. Petty thefts and small frauds gradually brought him into contact with the justice system, yet even when arrested, he displayed remarkable composure. Police officers later noted that he rarely panicked. Instead, he remained polite, cooperative, and confident. He often presented himself as misunderstood rather than dangerous. More than once, his calm demeanor appeared to soften the attitudes of those questioning him. These early experiences may have reinforced an important lesson in his mind. Appearance could be just as powerful as reality. By the 1960s, Charles had begun moving beyond petty offenses. He discovered that deception could be far more profitable than simple theft. Rather than relying on violence, he preferred carefully constructed lies, false identities, forged documents, and persuasive conversation. He realized that if people trusted him, they would often hand over valuable possessions voluntarily. He became increasingly fascinated with luxury. Expensive hotels, fine clothing, elegant restaurants, and international travel appealed to him. Yet the lifestyle he desired required far more money than honest work could provide. Rather than building wealth gradually, he searched for shortcuts, convincing himself that he possessed intelligence superior to those around him. During this period, he married a young French woman named Chantal Compagnon. Together they had a daughter named Usha. For a brief time, Charles appeared to settle into family life, but stability never seemed to satisfy him for long. Criminal activity continued, and the growing risks eventually made remaining in France increasingly difficult. As international travel became easier, Charles saw new opportunities abroad. Around the same time, thousands of young travelers from Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and the United States began following what became known as the Hippie Trail. This overland route through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Nepal, and Thailand attracted young people seeking adventure, spirituality, and cultural experiences. Most traveled on limited budgets, staying in inexpensive guest houses and relying heavily on the kindness of strangers. For Charles, these travelers represented opportunity. Unlike local residents, backpackers were unfamiliar with their surroundings. Many carried passports, travelers' checks, cash, cameras, jewelry, and other valuables. They frequently exchanged travel information with people they had just met. Friendships formed quickly because everyone was far from home. Charles understood human psychology exceptionally well. He knew that a confident smile, clean clothing, and apparent generosity could lower people's defenses. As he traveled throughout Asia, Charles introduced himself using various identities. Depending on the situation, he claimed to be a businessman, gemstone dealer, diplomat, or international trader. His multilingual abilities made these stories believable. He spoke French and English fluently and could adapt his speech to suit different audiences. He rarely rushed. Instead, he patiently built trust. Travelers remembered meeting a sophisticated man who seemed unusually generous. Sometimes he invited new acquaintances to dinner. Sometimes he offered advice about border crossings or local customs. Other times he appeared just when someone encountered travel difficulties. To exhausted backpackers far from home, his assistance often felt genuine. Charles also surrounded himself with trusted associates. Among the most notable was Marie-Andrée Leclerc, a Canadian woman who became deeply devoted to him. Intelligent and compassionate, she appeared to believe many of Charles's explanations and remained loyal despite growing concerns from outsiders. Their relationship would later attract significant public attention because investigators questioned how much she knew about his criminal activities. Another important associate was Ajay Chowdhury, an Indian man who traveled extensively with Charles during some of the years when investigators believe many crimes occurred. His exact role has remained the subject of debate, with historical accounts differing on the extent of his involvement. By the early 1970s, authorities across several countries had begun noticing similar patterns. Travelers reported being approached by a friendly foreign man offering assistance. Soon afterward, some discovered valuables missing. Others reported feeling ill after accepting food, drinks, or medication they believed had been offered in good faith. Some incidents resulted only in theft or fraud. Others became far more serious. Charles frequently exploited situations involving travelers experiencing genuine difficulties. If someone became sick, lost travel documents, or encountered financial problems, he positioned himself as a helpful friend capable of solving those issues. Trust became his most effective weapon. Rather than forcing his way into people's lives, he invited them to welcome him. Investigators later concluded that this pattern enabled him to commit numerous frauds throughout Asia. Victims often realized they had been deceived only after Charles had disappeared, leaving little evidence behind beyond false names and vague descriptions. As reports accumulated, police in different countries struggled to connect the cases. International information sharing during the early 1970s was far less efficient than it is today. Crimes occurring in Thailand, Nepal, India, and elsewhere were usually investigated separately. Charles benefited enormously from these limitations. He crossed borders frequently, changed identities regularly, and adapted his appearance whenever necessary. Among travelers, he maintained the image of an experienced adventurer. Among authorities, he often became little more than another foreign tourist. But eventually, investigators encountered cases that could not be dismissed as isolated fraud. In Thailand, authorities began investigating the deaths of several young foreign travelers. Some victims were discovered under circumstances that immediately raised suspicion. Others remained unidentified for extended periods because families back home had little idea where their loved ones had last traveled. As investigators compared reports, disturbing similarities emerged. Several victims had recently encountered a charming foreign man, matching Charles Sobhraj's description. Over time, investigators concluded that Charles had become the prime suspect in multiple murders committed during the mid-1970s, although not every death attributed to him resulted in a conviction. Historical accounts often differ regarding the total number of victims, with estimates ranging widely. Because evidence varied significantly between cases and several investigations were complicated by international jurisdictions, historians generally distinguish between murders for which he was convicted and additional cases in which he remained a suspect. One of the best-known victims was a young Dutch traveler named Cornelia Henk Hemker, whose remains were later identified following an extensive investigation. Another was Laurent Carrière, a French traveler. Their deaths became central to the growing investigation that eventually linked Charles to crimes committed across several countries. As more victims were identified, investigators recognized a chilling pattern. Many had been young backpackers exploring Asia alone. Many had recently formed friendships with Charles or members of his circle. Many had disappeared without warning, leaving worried families waiting for letters or postcards that never arrived. The investigation gained momentum largely through the determination of Dutch diplomat Herman Nippenberg, stationed in Bangkok. Unlike many others who initially viewed the disappearances as unrelated incidents involving adventurous tourists, Nippenberg became convinced that a serial offender was operating across international borders. Working patiently through diplomatic channels, police files, travel records, passport information, and witness interviews, he began assembling an increasingly detailed picture of Charles Sobhraj's movements. The process required extraordinary persistence. Records had to be compared across multiple countries. Witnesses remembered different names. Passports contained conflicting information. Descriptions varied, yet the same face kept appearing. The same sophisticated traveler. The same calm smile. The same remarkable ability to disappear before authorities arrived. As pressure mounted, Charles continued moving throughout Asia, believing he remained one step ahead of investigators. His confidence appeared almost limitless. Each successful escape reinforced his belief that he could outsmart anyone. But every deception leaves traces. Every lie eventually creates contradictions. And somewhere beyond the luxury hotels, busy airports, crowded markets, and endless border crossings, investigators were slowly closing the distance between themselves and the man who had spent years convincing the world that he was untouchable. As investigators in Thailand, Nepal, India, and other parts of Asia pieced together fragments of evidence, Charles Sobhraj continued to project an image of complete confidence. To those around him, he appeared untouched by the growing international interest in his activities. He moved from city to city with remarkable ease, checking into hotels under different names, carrying multiple passports, and introducing himself with convincing stories that changed depending on the audience. If he sensed that one identity had become risky, he simply adopted another. Every new border crossing became an opportunity to start over. What made Charles particularly difficult to catch was not simply his ability to travel, but his extraordinary talent for reading people. He could often sense what someone wanted to hear before they spoke. To a lonely traveler, he became a sympathetic companion. Hotel staff, he appeared as a wealthy businessman. To local merchants, he presented himself as a gemstone trader with international connections. To officials, he remained calm, respectful, and cooperative. His confidence frequently discouraged suspicion. As the investigation widened, authorities learned that Charles had become highly skilled in document fraud. Investigators recovered passports that had been altered, stolen, or used by people other than their rightful owners. These documents allowed members of his group to cross borders while concealing their true identities. The changing identities complicated efforts by police agencies that already struggled to communicate across international jurisdictions. Meanwhile, families thousands of miles away continued searching for answers. Parents waited for letters that never arrived. Friends wondered why phone calls had suddenly stopped. In an era long before smartphones, social media, or instant messaging, weeks or even months could pass before anyone realized that a traveler had disappeared. The uncertainty made investigations painfully slow. Among those refusing to give up was Dutch diplomat Herman Nippenberg in Bangkok. He carefully organized photographs, travel records, witness statements, passport information, and police reports, slowly building connections that others had overlooked. His determination proved critical. Rather than treating each missing tourist as an isolated case, he began seeing a pattern stretching across national borders. His work attracted the attention of investigators in other countries, who started comparing their own unsolved cases. Although the evidence varied from one investigation to another, Charles Sobhraj's name surfaced repeatedly. Despite mounting pressure, Charles continued operating with astonishing boldness. He appeared convinced that intelligence alone could defeat any investigation. For a time, that confidence seemed justified. Then came a mistake. In July 1976, Charles attempted to deceive a group of French graduate students in New Delhi. According to court records and historical accounts, he presented himself as someone who could assist them during their travels. Members of the group soon became suspicious after several of them experienced sudden illness. Unlike many earlier victims, these students acted quickly and alerted local authorities. Police responded before Charles could disappear. The arrest marked a turning point. Although investigators in several countries suspected him in far more serious crimes, The immediate charges in India related to offenses committed there. Even so, authorities elsewhere recognized that one of the world's most elusive fugitives had finally been taken into custody. His arrest attracted considerable international attention. Journalists sought to understand how one man had managed to evade police across so many countries for so long. Charles, however, remained remarkably composed. Photographs from the period show him displaying little emotion. He answered questions selectively, often appearing more interested in observing the people around him than defending himself. Even in custody, he projected confidence. Eventually, Indian courts convicted him on charges connected to the case before them, and he began serving a lengthy prison sentence. For many observers, the story appeared finished. They were mistaken. Charles Sobhraj had no intention of spending the rest of his life behind bars. During his imprisonment, he earned a reputation as an unusually resourceful inmate. Reports indicate that he studied prison routines carefully, learning the habits of guards and officials. He maintained courteous relationships with many people around him and appeared patient. Years passed. Then, in one of the most remarkable episodes of his life, Charles put into motion a plan that would once again place his name in headlines around the world. 1986, while imprisoned in New Delhi's Tihar jail, Charles organized a dramatic escape. Historical accounts state that he hosted what appeared to be a birthday celebration inside the prison. During the gathering, several prison personnel became incapacitated after consuming food and drinks that investigators later believed had been tampered with. With security compromised, Charles and several other inmates escaped from the facility. News of the escape spread rapidly. For authorities, it was both embarrassing and alarming. A man already linked to multiple international investigations had once again disappeared. Police launched an intensive search. For several weeks, uncertainty dominated headlines. Where had he gone? Had he left India? Would he vanish once more into the maze of international travel? The answer came sooner than many expected. Less than a month after escaping, Charles was recaptured in the Indian state of Goa. The escape had failed. Yet the incident only added to his growing reputation as one of history's most elusive criminals. His recapture carried another consequence. Because escaping prison resulted in additional legal proceedings, his incarceration in India was extended. Some observers later suggested that Charles may have understood this possibility from the beginning. At the time, Thailand's legal ability to pursue him was limited by statutes of limitation that were approaching expiration. By remaining imprisoned in India longer, he ultimately avoided immediate extradition to Thailand while those legal deadlines continued to run. Whether that outcome was carefully planned or simply an unintended consequence has been debated by historians. What is certain is that Charles remained in Indian custody for many additional years. Throughout his imprisonment, he became an object of fascination. Journalists requested interviews. Writers researched his life. Documentary producers sought access. He often appeared surprisingly willing to discuss aspects of his story, though investigators cautioned that many of his statements could not be independently verified. Charles had spent much of his life creating carefully crafted narratives, making it difficult to separate fact from self-promotion. When his prison term in India finally ended in 1997, he was released and returned to France. For the first time in decades, he appeared to enjoy a period of relative freedom. Media organizations from around the world sought interviews. His reputation had grown enormously. Books examined the international investigations. Television programs explored the mystery surrounding his life. Some observers worried that public fascination risked overshadowing the suffering experienced by victims and their families. Others emphasized that remembering the crimes remained essential to understanding their impact. For several years, Charles largely avoided returning to countries where unresolved legal matters remained. Then, in 2003, he made a decision that surprised nearly everyone. He traveled to Nepal. Authorities there had long sought him in connection with the murders of 2 backpackers in Kathmandu during the 1970s. Unlike some other jurisdictions, Nepal still had active legal proceedings available. His presence in Kathmandu quickly attracted attention. Reports indicate that journalists and local observers recognized him. Police confirmed his identity. He was arrested. This time, the legal process moved toward charges connected to murders committed decades earlier. The trials attracted international media coverage. Evidence gathered years before was presented alongside witness testimony and investigative records. After judicial proceedings, Nepalese courts convicted Charles Sobhraj for the murder of American traveler Connie Joe Bronzage. He received a life sentence. Later, he was also convicted in connection with the murder of Canadian traveler Laurent Carrière, resulting in an additional sentence. For many families, the convictions represented a measure of long-delayed justice. Although no court decision could undo the pain caused by the loss of loved ones, the verdicts acknowledged responsibility after decades of uncertainty. Charles spent many years in a Nepalese prison. Age gradually changed the man who had once crossed continents under countless identities. His hair turned white. His health became increasingly fragile. The international fugitive who had once relied on constant movement now lived within prison walls, surrounded by routines he could no longer escape. In December 2022, Nepal's Supreme Court ordered his release on humanitarian grounds, citing his advanced age and health considerations after he had served many years in custody under Nepalese law. Following his release, he was deported to France. His return marked the end of one of the longest and most unusual criminal journeys of the 20th century. Today, Charles Sobhraj remains a figure who continues to provoke discussion among historians, criminologists, and documentary filmmakers. Yet beneath the fascination lies a far more important truth. His story is not ultimately about a clever criminal. It is about the young travelers whose dreams ended far from home. It is about parents who waited for children who never returned. It is about investigators who refused to abandon cases that others believed impossible to solve. And it is about the persistence of justice, even when decades pass before the truth is fully acknowledged. Charles Sobhraj spent much of his life believing he could stay one step ahead of everyone else. He crossed borders, adopted new identities, manipulated trust, and repeatedly reinvented himself. For years, it seemed as though the world itself could not catch him. But time has a way of exposing even the most carefully constructed illusions. The passports eventually became evidence. The aliases became records. The lies began to contradict one another. The investigations that once seemed disconnected slowly merged into a single picture. And the man who had built his life on deception found himself remembered not for the image he tried to create, but for the immense suffering left in his wake. In the end, luxury faded, fame faded, charm faded. What remained were the names of the victims, the determination of those who sought justice, and a reminder that no amount of intelligence or manipulation can permanently outrun accountability. Long after the headlines disappear and the myths give way to history, that is the legacy Charles Sobhraj leaves behind.